question then is Hoffa an improvement over Dave Beck?
Oh, there's no comparison between Mr. Hoffa and Mr. Beck. Mr. Beck was just a thief. I mean, this is not...
We may be in court together, you and
I hope the hell you know what you're doing, because... You've got people in Detroit, at least 15 who have police records. You've got Joey Glimko in Chicago. I say you're not tough enough to get rid of these people then.
Well, I don't propose to
You haven't moved
tough.
against any of them.
I don't propose to act tough, and I will follow the Constitution of the International Union. I don't frighten too easy.
Well, you're not
and I don't intend to have the impression left that's been stated publicly that I'm controlled by gangsters. I am not controlled by them.
Did, while leaving the hearings, after these people had testified regarding this matter, did you say, that SOB, I'll break his back?
Who?
You.
Say to who?
To anyone. Did you make that statement after these people testified before the committee?
I never talked to either one of them after testifying.
No, I'm not talking about to them. Did you make that statement here in the hearing room after the testimony was finished?
Not concerning them, far as I know of.
Well, who did you make it about?
I don't know. I may have been discussing somebody in a figure of speech.
Well, who did you make the statement? Whose back were you going to break?
I don't even remember it.
Well, whose back were you going to break, Mr. Hoffa?
Figure of speech, I don't even know who I was talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not satisfied when I see men like Jimmy Hoffa in charge of the largest union in the United States, still free.
There are those who will tell you that Hoffa is a racket man, that Hoffa is part of the underworld. They have tried to arouse, if you will, a revolution with this international union. First with the hearings before the McClellan Committee and little Bobby Kennedy.
Would you allow, as a Teamster official, a man who was a communist, who was elected by the membership?
We don't have any communists in our Teamsters. Just a moment, please, that I know of.
What do you mean? There's no question about Mr. Goldblatt, although there can be a question about Mr. Hoffa. There's no question about Mr. Goldblatt.
Oh, wait a minute, just a moment. Don't say anything about a question about Hoffa. There is no question about Hoffa, and don't you say that either.
Does Robert Kennedy strike you as a good candidate?
He wasn't a good attorney general. He, in all probability, a worse senator. I would hate to think what would happen if he became president of the United States. He'd probably have a fascist government because he is a spoiled brat.
A continuation of the vendetta of Bob Kennedy.
I have been sentenced. I will appeal. I am not guilty. And I say to the millions of members of organized labor, have heed. Because those who fight for you and fight to win will find that out of this conviction, the zeal of Attorney General Robert Kennedy.
An absolute spoiled brat, a man who never had to work, a man who had no principle. I have no respect for him then, I have no respect for his memory now. It will not happen, because if he does, he's going to get hurt.
I learned in 1962 that Mr. Parton had been entrusted with the mission of securing plastic explosives to be used in either blowing up Mr. Bobby Kennedy, then the U.S. Attorney General, in his automobile or in his home.
Did you learn anything that backed that up from your own personal experience?
Yes, there were 2 telephone calls that were monitored by me. The calls originated with Mr. Parton and terminated with Mr. Hoffa on the other end of the line. Mr. Parton discussed as briefly as possible, being cut off by Mr. Hoffa, that he had obtained the plastic explosive that Mr. Hoffa was seeking.
Tell us about the vice operations down in Lake County, Indiana.
Declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might then incriminate me.
Would you tell us whether if you have opposition from anybody that you dispose of them by having them stuffed in a trunk? Is that what you do, Mr. Giancana?
Declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might then incriminate me.
Will you tell us anything about any of your operations, or you just giggle every time I ask you a question?
Declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might then incriminate me.
I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana.
Robert Kennedy brought a lot of pressure on the CIA to do things to foment insurrection against Castro.
Plots in the CIA included assassination, and one scheme in particular angered Robert Kennedy because it involved organized crime and one of his mortal enemies, the mobster Sam Giancana. In Las Vegas, a jealous Giancana hired a private investigator to bug the hotel room of his mistress, the singer Phyllis McGuire. When the crime was exposed, Giancana demanded that the charges be dropped.
No comment. I'm sorry.
He bragged that he was involved in a top-secret operation with the government. When word reached Kennedy that a mob boss he was trying to prosecute wanted a favor, he demanded an explanation. He received this memo from CIA lawyer Larry Houston in May of 1962, informing him that Giancana and the mob had been hired by the CIA to murder Fidel Castro. This plot had been hatched by the CIA and authorized during the Eisenhower administration. Kennedy was outraged and intensified his investigation of Giancana.
I think he cracked down hard and harshly to send Giancana a message that whatever he thought the deal was, whatever the CIA had represented the deal to him as being, that it was not a deal.
I think he did not stop the plots, but I think he gathered from Larry Houston that the plots had stopped, and he expressed his disapproval and assumed that meant that they wouldn't continue in the future, but they did in fact continue. Well, I think they misled him and deceived him, and I think all intelligence agencies do that. It's in the nature of the beast.
The nation's underworld gets the unwelcome spotlight of publicity as the Senate's Investigations Subcommittee begins new hearings on crime. Arkansas Senator McClelland is at the helm. Attorney General Robert Kennedy paints a grim picture of the rise of lawlessness under the Cosa Nostra, or Mafia. This he describes as the government of organized gambling, narcotics peddling, extortion, racketeering, and controlling of certain trade unions. He says the income runs into billions. These hearings always attract a large number of spectators. This one is particularly crowded, awaiting the first public appearance of Joseph Velaki, the convicted hoodlum whose confessions to the FBI have reportedly put a price of $100,000 on his head by the infuriated Mafia.
As Attorney General, Robert Kennedy made it clear that he would not play favorites with his family's friends. He approved the prosecution of Judge Vincent Keogh. Keogh's brother was a powerful congressman and JFK supporter. He did this even though President Kennedy took the congressman as his guest to the 1962 Army-Navy game as a message to his brother to reconsider the indictment.
I'll tell you why it was important. It was very, very widely known that there was a grand jury investigation and what was going on up in New York. The entire Department of Justice personnel, everybody in the department was looking at that case because this was going to be a test as to whether Bob Kennedy was incorruptible or not. It was that important.
The judge was eventually convicted of bribery, along with the mobster Tony Dux Corallo.
And from then on, everybody in the department knew that Bob Kennedy was not there to fix cases. He was there to proceed with the enforcement of the criminal law, regardless of who the subject matter was about.
His incorruptibility was repeatedly tested. Kennedy rejected an FBI report exonerating Igor Cassini of being an illegal lobbyist for a foreign dictator. Cassini was a friend of Robert's father and of Jacqueline Kennedy's. But when writer Peter Moss exposed Cassini in a magazine article, Kennedy indicted and convicted Cassini.